So I want to share for the next 10 minutes some considerations we developed within IBM over the last couple of weeks, of times already during various presentations today. Running CloudFoundry across multiple sites, multiple regions is something that's of interest to several communities out there. We've seen a couple of case studies on the web where people looked at various aspects of it, and also we have an interest of running CloudFoundry and services across multiple regions. So we looked at what does it mean to run a CloudFoundry across multiple sites. It's not a solved problem yet. We are looking very much for input from the community, for your experience on learnings, on recommendations of how we can take this forward. So first of all, what are the two main objectives why multi-site support for CloudFoundry or running CloudFoundry across multiple sites is an important topic? First one, obviously, is improve the redundancy of CloudFoundry itself, like the management componentry, Cloud Controller, Health Manager, and so forth, but also improving specifically the redundancy of applications, because I want to run applications across multiple regions to be able to tolerate the outage of one particular region. The other important aspect is to control the location of apps and services, be it for latency reasons. I have a certain customer set I want to serve specifically, and I want to deploy my app into a region that is close to that customer, or into a data center that's close to the customer, or for other reasons like data governance. We heard some examples before. Data shouldn't be leaving the country, and so forth. So which set of components is in scope for that discussion? Just to touch on briefly, and we heard also a couple of talks already before about that. First of all, the CloudFoundry componentry itself, like Cloud Controller, Health Manager, Router, and so forth. The apps that are running on CloudFoundry, and also services that are attached to those apps. Those three sets of components or categories of components needs to be looked at as we talk about multi-regional setup. So what are those key considerations we need to think about? First one, support any number of sites. So traditionally, we often talk about data center setups where we have a primary site and a backup site. In a cloud world, you might have many sites, 10, 15, 20 sites, and you want to run the application across those multiple sites. That gives you increased resiliency, but it also serves the second objective that I talked about before, which is optimizing or controlling the location of where your application runs. You might have many customers around the globe that want to use an application, and you want to serve all those customers with the optimal latency, so you need to run your application across those multiple sites. Now, the second point is we want to be able to tolerate the outage of any site. It could be just one site that goes down. It could be multiple sites that go down. We heard the story from Matthew earlier today where he talked about the outage of CloudFoundry in one particular region. Going into a multi-region setup, multi-site setup helps alleviating those problems. So the obvious approach for working around the outage of one or multiple sites is you could be deploying CloudFoundry, an entire set of CloudFoundry components that I talked about before, into each particular region. Each of those regions would be self-contained. It would be isolated in terms of failure. If one of them goes down, the others are not impacted in any way by the outage of the other regions, and they could continue operating. Now, if you do that, the obvious question arises, now do I, as a developer who wants to push an application, need to interact with each of those sites individually? And in such a setup, I would have to push my application into site A, into site B, into site C, and any other application. And I would also have to manually wire up the routing, the global routing that serves my application so that the load is distributed across multiple sites. So the next layer of abstraction I can think about is, do we need something, and we don't have that today, so I want to put it out as a discussion topic for today and also tomorrow and going forward. Do we need some kind of cross-management function? For the developer, it would have the benefit of the developer can see all his apps across multiple sites, like do a CF apps, and he gets all apps across all sites. He can push and update apps into dedicated regions, so I can select the region, the specific region I want to have an app pushed into. And I can do the same thing for services, because I might want to instantiate a service in a region that's close to the app, maybe because of latency reasons or other reasons. When I do that, I need a mechanism that allows me to automatically configure the global routing layer with the information about the apps running in various regions. I might push an app into site A and into site B. Both deployments should be available via one and the same globally available URL. So we would need to have a hook-in basically from such a cross-regional management layer into the global routing layer so it gets configured automatically. Now, the next question is, if I can do that, but I want to be able maybe to instantiate or deploy an app into site A. I want to deploy the same app into site B, and I want to have both of those apps connect to a service instance that only exists once, maybe in site B. With a setup that I described earlier, I would have challenges with that because CloudFoundry inside A only knows about apps and services inside A, and the same is true for site B. So I would need to share knowledge about service instances across regions. So I can do the binding between apps and services across regions. So there is the thinking of, do we maybe need some shared data? Data about services, data about apps that can be shared across those regions so we can realize those scenarios that I just described. From a technology perspective, I think there are various ways to realize that. Also here, would be very interested in the feedback from the community. Is there maybe opportunity to use linked data so we can connect those cloud controller databases sitting in each of the regions with each other to get a federated view? So this is just a very brief summary of the considerations that we are making around CloudFoundry. Would be very interested in your feedback and in discussions with you over the next coming days and going forward. And as a very last comment, we are hiring around our efforts on CloudFoundry, so please feel free to reach out. Thank you.